The story begins with a crashed car and someone asks whether or not they should save their boss. He's performing CPR, but he's unsure if he actually wants her to come back to life. This is because she made him work under the 996 schedule. Basically, you work from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week. And that's why, watching her die, he wonders if what happened to her is just karma accumulating. He starts to lift her but wonders if at least helping her now might earn him some good virtues. He moves toward her sweet lips when suddenly a golden light descends from the heavens and enters the woman. The protagonist complains that if she dies, he won't know who to demand his labor rights from. At the same time, he says he never imagined her lips would be so soft and sweet. At that moment, she opens her eyes. The protagonist is blushing as she asks if he's looking to die. A system message appears, stating that he successfully startled the Empress and has earned the ability of divine appearance and a golden shield with 31 uses. The protagonist doesn't know where this system voice is coming from as a leg approaches him. It looked like he was going to get kicked, but instead he's being tortured in a cruel manner. He resolves it with jujitsu and starts running from this dangerous boss. She then says he'll have to face divine punishment, but the protagonist is confused and asks what's going on. He tries to explain to her that she just fainted because she hit her head and asks what she thinks she's doing. Lin finds it strange that she can't use her true energy. Being crushed in a cruel way, our boy says she better go to the hospital, especially since the ambulance won't arrive quickly. He still needed to return to work, but it would be nice if she paid extra for everything he'd done. However, Lin is staring at her hand, confused, not knowing where she is or why it seems all her energy has disappeared. Some time passes, and we are at the protagonist's home. He was arriving from a tiring day at work and wanted the rest. As soon as he enters, he finds his chubby friend in his natural habitat and asks if there's any food left. However, the friend only asks if he was drained by the evil boss. But suddenly, his friend seems startled and drops the can he's holding. The protagonist, confused, asks what the problem is. The boss had entered the house and asked if this cage was what he called an apartment. The protagonist wants to know what she's doing there, while the chubby friend says he should give notice before bringing a girl over. However, the boss is confused and says that if he's not careful, he'll suffer divine punishment. The friend is also confused when suddenly she grabs Louis's hand and tells him to come along. Seeing that she's covered in blood with torn clothes, the friend assumes they're engaging in some forbidden fun. Outside, our boy tells her that despite being her subordinate, she can't keep cutting into his rest time. However, Lin says that based on what he said, he seems to be her disciple. She explains that she's an empress from the underworld who cultivated for over 3,000 years to ascend to the realm of humans and gods. And that's why she wants to know where they are and why she can't use her innate energy. Louis is confused, wondering if she's crazy. However, he's not normal either and mentions that since Earth's emergence, he's heard of some cultivators. But that's extremely rare, and as far as he knows, the two of them are just normal people. However, she reaches out, seemingly trying to strangle him. He begs her to calm down. Lin approaches and says he doesn't seem to emit the aura of the Justice Alliance. Our boy distances himself again from this crazy woman. But behind the trees, 3 suspicious men are discussing whether she's the right person. One of them says they need to make sure this looks like a robbery. However, Lin says she noticed someone listening in on their conversation and declares they deserve divine punishment. The 3 productive members of society emerge, saying they didn't expect to be discovered so easily. As soon as our boy sees energy in one of their hands, he wonders why cultivators want to take him down. The guy says it's a pity, but the young man saw things he shouldn't have and lunges at him, telling him to go to hell. However, that's when the golden shield he had received activates. The men are thrown against the tree and wonder how this is possible. The system appears again, saying that because he caused damage, he will receive some beginner cultivation packs. Yui is confused by these voices, and Lin says she'll have to teach her disciples never to let an enemy escape alive and that she will finish off these insects. She kicks her leg upward, making the man disappear, and says that sometimes physical strength is enough. Meanwhile, Yui realizes he has indeed received the little system. Moreover, it seems connected to this strange woman in front of him, who he's sure is not Miss Lin. Back at home, his friend decides to leave the apartment to him for the night and go sleep at an internet cafe, but he warns Yui to keep quiet to avoid getting scolded. The friend says he can't believe Yui brought this woman home, and Yui is thinking the same thing. He then tells her to come in and make herself comfortable and apologizes for the mess. She sits down, saying she doesn't care about trivial things, even though her disciples tend to be strict. Yui goes to the fridge and asks her what this business is about being an empress who crossed worlds. If this is truly possession, then what happened to Lin Mia's body? She explains that she was in the middle of a tribulation to evolve when she got caught in a battle with the Justice Alliance. Suddenly, in the midst of the fight, she ended up here powerless. Yui says she's constantly mentioning this alliance and asks if, by chance, they are enemies. The Empress responds that those guys are a bunch of hypocrites pretending to be righteous, but are utterly disgusting. And since they want to fight her, they deserve to be turned into a river of blood. Yui, standing by the fridge, thinks this woman sounds more like a terrorist. He then gives her a glass of water to drink. She tells him to take a look at how this world works. He explains that in his world there are things like magic and extremely advanced technology. The boss watches some Lolitas performing magic. She seems impressed by the power until Yui shows her spaceships blowing up planets. He warns her to be careful because there are people in this world who could destroy her and the entire planet with a flick of a finger. Staring at the images, she asks if that's really possible. He confirms it, saying she needs to understand that personal cultivation won't stand a chance against these forces. That's why she should never harm anyone, or the consequences could be very serious. She suddenly stands up and says the energy in his world seems very scarce. She places her hand on his forehead and says that the boy's aptitude is one of the best she's ever encountered. Yui suspects it must be something related to that system. Lin explains that if he were in her world in 300 years, he would reach an extremely high realm. Suddenly, his phone rings. He answers it while thinking all he ever wanted in life was to be an ordinary worker and make a little money. It turns out to be one of his colleagues saying that if the bugs aren't fixed by tonight, he doesn't even need to show up at the office tomorrow. Frustrated, Yui says he's not an artificial intelligence that doesn't need rest. Even Lin comments that working so late is no different from slavery. She mentions that in her world, once a bridge repairman did something similar, so she cut him into pieces. Yui is confused because she mentioned it so naturally. She then says that for something as simple as that, she was called a murderer, which doesn't make any sense to her. Turning around with a smile, she says it doesn't matter because those guys can't defeat her. Yui thinks to himself that she doesn't seem like such a bad person. He says she's at least a dystopian warrior, someone who fights for what's right. He then asks if her phone is still working because it's essential for daily life. She reaches into her pocket and questions if it's really that important since she doesn't feel anything magical about it. She hands him the device, asking if that's what he means. The protagonist says that this expensive phone is really good because after the car accident, it's still intact. He then grabs her wrist, saying that now he'll show her how to use it. He takes her fingerprint, touches the screen, and explains that this is how you unlock a phone. However, Lin turns red, calling him a pervert who needs to be punished. In the next scene, a delivery arrives for him. The boss asks why the air smells so spicy. He invites her to eat some meat with him, and she watches curiously. She puts a piece in her mouth, gets startled, and says it's much less dangerous than she imagined. She comments that the meat feels like a dragon's breath. She asks if people really eat something like this, and he asks if they don't have anything similar in her world. She explains that they do use spices there, but nothing as spicy as this. He smiles and says it's amazing how different civilizations can be. He picks up what seems to be a Coke and says that even though it looks like poison, it'll help with the flavor, and it's quite tasty. He takes a sip to show it's not poison, and she drinks after him. However, she seems not to like it, leaning back and saying it gave her a strange sensation in her mouth and a tingling in her stomach. He warns her to be careful because if she drinks it all at once, she'll burp. Apparently, she burped. She says it has a bitter and sweet taste at the same time, which is very good. She imagines her disciples warning her about poison, but she replies that they shouldn't be afraid because this poison will only temper her body. By temper, she doesn't mean to grow stronger, and the disciples are all happy. He asks if it's really that good. She explains she was just reminiscing about some good stories from the sect. As he's about to put the food away, she grabs his arm, saying he doesn't need to worry because she'll develop tolerance. Yui warns her to be careful because toxins can accumulate. Excited, she says that an empress can't be afraid of something so simple. She takes another bite, but in the next scene, she's claiming it's not that spicy after all. A while later, in her peculiar way, she asks what his favorite drink is. Meanwhile, he's telling her to stop being stubborn. His phone rings again and he answers it. Obviously, it's another scolding from his boss, asking why he hasn't fixed the bugs yet. The boss warns that if it's not done by tomorrow morning, he might as well never return. But Yui is confident since this guy answers to Miss Lin. He looks over and sees her. Even though the soul isn't the same, the body is. The scene shifts to the next day. Yui explains how everything works in the world. She responds that she already understands the elevator is a kind of staircase that moves on its own. The protagonist praises her and reminds her that everyone will call her Boss Lin. She assures him she understands and tells him not to worry. However, as the elevator doors open, a blonde guy walks in complaining that Xiao Kiki is so cruel. He approaches her and says he heard about the accident but is glad to see she's doing so well. He offers her the special breakfast he made just for her. At that moment, she turns to Yui and asks who this person is. He explains it's a guy named Gu Shonam, her former suitor. He's the son of the building's owner, and everyone thinks he's an idiot. The blonde guy turns to Yui and tells him that next time he better leave her alone in the elevator since someone as smelly as him shouldn't be near her. But he's completely ignored as Yui suggests they hurry to the office. A chubby guy comes running saying it's good that the boss has finally arrived. He advises her to fire Yui because yesterday he didn't finish the work and only badmouthed her. Yui leans into Lin's ear and tells her it was this guy who kept calling him in the middle of the night. Lin turns to the man and says that, as far as she knows, the one ruining her reputation is him. The man, embarrassed, says he would never do such a thing and insists Yui must have lied to her. She then says that she spent the whole night with Yui, so she knows very well who's lying. The blonde guy is utterly confused by this situation. The protagonist realizes she just poured gasoline on the fire, but the system detects that he shocked some nearby people and grants him a few martial arts skills. The scene shifts to the president's office. Yui tells her not to worry because getting through this login won't be difficult for him. As soon as he accesses it, he'll know exactly where she lives and then she can go home. However, the Empress asks why he's helping so much. As far as she knows, the previous owner of the body wasn't very kind to him. Yui replies that he's a good young man who loves helping others, but in reality he knows that if he commands the Empress, he'll basically be an emperor. Plus, it'll be great to see that chubby guy get what he deserves. And finally, he can't abandon her to die after what happened yesterday. She remembers being attacked and asks what this business about dying is. But Yui completely ignores her and says the food the blonde guy brought is really good. He brings over the dish and asks if she wants some more. However, she remembers yesterday's spicy food and says that red dish must be too fiery. She rolls to the side, refusing to eat it. Sometime later, they leave the room and the chubby guy is holding 3 buckets, asking if he hasn't been punished enough. But she responds that he should already be happy to be alive. If he complains one more time, he'll earn 10 more hours on the clock. Shannon then approaches and asks why Yui was in her office. He warns her to be careful because that guy is poor, unrefined, and stinky. The Empress glares at him. Shannon apologizes, wondering why she's giving him that look. Yui then thanks her, saying that breakfast was delicious. He walks away with the boss, saying they have private matters to handle. Shannon obviously wants to know what those matters are. Yui remembers that he needs to shock people to earn system bonuses, while Shannon thinks Yui will have to pay for what he's doing. The scene shifts to a luxurious neighborhood at the Shanshu mansion. Yui compliments the Empress, saying she's getting the hang of using a phone. The door opens and she says adapting to the new world comes naturally to her. Upon entering, the protagonist comments that the house is as luxurious as he expected. He talks about the kitchen appliances and says he'll teach her how to use them later, but she says there's no need since she's never cooked in her life. He then shows her the bathroom, and she remarks how strange it is to do all hygienic tasks in the same place. He explains how to use the toilet, shows her the shower, and she says she'll take a bath. She tells him to fetch some clothes as she's sure the body's previous owner must have left some behind. As soon as Yui opens the wardrobe, he sees the hanging clothes. He remarks that he didn't expect the former boss to be this kind of person. He picks out some clothes, thinking at least he doesn't have to worry about whether they'll fit since it's the right person. Meanwhile, the Empress is in the bath asking if he's prepared everything because she's about to catch a cold. Yui's concern, however, is something else. How is he going to teach her to wear modern clothes? He hands them to her and tells her to look at pictures and not put them on the wrong way. She retorts that he should stop nagging because she's not that dumb. Despite the questionable design, the only thing she finds strange is that this string is considered clothing. Meanwhile, Yui is in the living room watching TV. He calls her to watch a historical documentary. He plans to explain everything about human evolution and the creation of industries. She sits beside him, saying she's curious. However, some time passes and she's already asleep. The protagonist gets annoyed that she claimed to be interested but didn't last 10 minutes. He goes to cover her with a blanket, but she seems to sense that something slashes at it. Seeing the blanket tear, he's confused, especially since she's still asleep. Slowly, he moves a sheet of paper closer to her, and she slashes at it again. He is shocked that she has such a sharp alert system even while sleeping. He decides to move farther away since it seems a bit dangerous while she's asleep. He sits down and starts checking out the items he received from the system. Then he begins practicing one of the fist techniques he obtained. The name Heavenly Fist of Dal sounded very pretentious. He assumes a few combat stances and feels as though his body is burning. His chest tightens and his heart feels like it's about to explode. She approaches him and says that if he continues at this pace, he'll eventually die. She doesn't know exactly what he's doing, but the better the technique, the riskier it is. Even though he has talent, his foundation is very weak, which just stresses her out. Essentially, he's too weak. The poor guy feels crushed. She says that now that she's had a little nap, she's full of energy. Yui was about to comment on her attacks when his phone rings. It's one of the bosses asking for help with some company files. The protagonist responds that he had taken Miss Lin home and would return to help soon. He tells her he'll try to come back at night, and she asks why he doesn't just stay by her side to help with the tedious tasks. However, he says that with great power comes great responsibility, and he needs to ensure the company doesn't fall into chaos. He then heads to the door, saying there's no reason to make life harder when she's calm, but she tells him to stop and comes closer. He's about to ask why when she steps even closer. Yui asks if this isn't a little inappropriate. She flicks his forehead and tells him to forget it and leave. The poor guy is left confused. Before closing the door, though, he says he'll order some deliveries for her, but asks her not to scare people. She reflects that now, without innate energy, she can't transmit her consciousness anymore. The protagonist has worked all day and it's finally time to go home. The Saitama of the office calls him president and suggests to treat everyone to dinner. The boy asks what this president thing is all about. Saitama jokes that they all know he's close to President Lin. Yui tells them to stop exaggerating. He explains to everyone that she had a car accident and he just happened to be nearby and helped her. If he really had something going on with her, he wouldn't be stuck there doing overtime. Nearby, Shaman overhears everything. He thinks this explains it all. It was just a coincidence. There's no way a loser like him could get close to Miss Lin. Back at the mansion, we see the president when someone asks why the lights are off. The Empress turns with anger and says he'll have to face the consequences. However, the protagonist simply places food on the table and asks what's wrong. She freezes for a second before devouring everything, commenting that he should have brought it earlier. Shortly after, she's calmer and says that food without spice feels a bit bland. He tosses the leftovers in the trash, muttering that it's really hard to understand her. Lin then shows him her phone and says this thing must have something against her. She tried to order food with 2 taps, so why doesn't it work for her? He sits down and takes a look, showing her that she needs to scan her face to make a payment. While she's fiddling with the phone, he cleans the table, explaining that this is how money transfers work in this world. While tidying up, he notices some sheets of paper with meditation techniques written on them. He asks Lin if she can read that sort of thing, but the Empress reveals that she's the one who wrote it. He's shocked, and she remarks that of course she still knows how to use paper and a pen. The meditation technique integrates the body, energy, essence, and soul. It would help him grow strong enough to start learning some techniques. The boy feels embarrassed. He never imagined she'd go to such lengths for him. However, she winks and says there are conditions for him to accept her method. He has to practice the way she dictates. That's because natural talent alone isn't enough. He'll have 3 weeks to master the first chapter or he'll disappear because she doesn't keep lazy people around. Now he's trembling and awkwardly asks how long it usually takes disciples to master this. She says it's normally 4 weeks, but since he's talented, it won't be a problem for him. He starts reading a few pages about energy and pulse. It's about the circulation of energy rhythm returning to its true nature. Meanwhile, she wants a bite of something sweet and refreshing she's eating. She tells him he should eat first before practicing. But Yui is already spitting blue fire, saying he feels like his body has become lighter. The Empress is impressed that he mastered the first technique in just a few breaths. Even he's confused, asking if he really mastered it, but the Empress, now sitting on the counter, tells him that being able to gather energy proves he has. She tells him to breathe again and try to accumulate power. The boy looks like a vacuum, pulling in all the energy from the environment. Even she gets startled, asking what kind of monster he is. For impressing the Empress once again, he receives the instant step ability. He starts to think that every time he impresses her, her expectations will rise, making it harder and harder. As much as she was a good sheep, there's a limit to how much wool he can shear. She asks why he's laughing, and he replies that it's nothing. Then he asks if she has any other instructions because he wants to get back to practicing. She says yes and mentions they have a very important problem. He asks what it is, and she wants to know why there's no Coke in the house. The poor guy is confused. Later, he says teaching her to use delivery apps at this moment is dangerous, but she's already drinking her Coke, saying she feels amazing. As he's leaving, she says there's something else she needs to remind him of. He should be more cautious because she's seen countless prodigies fall due to arrogance. He must always remember that there are mountains beyond mountains. But in the middle of her lecture, she suddenly starts hiccuping uncontrollably. She covers her mouth and says this body is strangely fragile. He leaves, saying he warned her not to drink so quickly. She tells him to disappear or she'll finish him off. He responds that she should know that if she keeps drinking that, she'll get diabetes and cavities. The Empress asks if she shouldn't drink it, and he slams the door, saying it's better not to. With that, she relaxes, saying she finally has a little peace. But from outside, he shouts, reminding her not to forget that his number is first on the contact list. The Empress reflects that in her past world, everyone feared her. It's been a long time since she had someone care about her this much. Yui is back home, wondering where his brother has gone. He decides to flop on the couch since the day was exhausting and opens up that little game of his. He checks the group chat with his friends who are talking about getting a good score. Yui asks to play, but suddenly everyone claims to have stomach aches and wants to leave. Apparently, Yui is one of those players who sinks the team, which is why no one wants to play with him. But someone called Old Maniac says he'll be in town soon and asks if Yui wants to grab a meal tomorrow. Yui accepts and gets all excited. He reflects that he's been playing with Old Maniac for 3 or 4 years, but has never met him in person. Meanwhile, in his surveillance room, someone comments that they disappeared into a strange neighborhood. A bald guy says they went there to investigate, but there were no remains of the bodies. Another person replies not to worry because they already found a way to deal with that child. The next day, Yui is messaging his friend, saying he's waiting for him to arrive, all while thinking about the food he ordered. Then someone approaches. Is it Old Maniac? What's going on? Has the game flipped? Are girls now pretending to be old men? Yui tells the young woman that the table is already reserved. He starts to think she works for the bar and comments on how competitive the beverage market has become. But then she smiles and says she is Old Maniac. She shows their chat history, startling Yui. Feeling awkward, he asks if she's sure, pointing out that her voice sounds very different. The girl explains that people think she's very gullible and easily tricked, which is why she prefers to pretend to be an old man online. She says the one who introduced her was someone named Ling Ji, her sister. Yui comments that now it makes sense why he sometimes heard a woman's voice on Old Maniac's microphone. Feeling awkward, she asks him to stop calling her that and says her name is Xiao Tu, and she'll be living in this city for a while. Later, by a lake, he asks if she isn't afraid of him since she came alone. She says he's overthinking because she feels safe, having trained since childhood. She's confident she could handle 3 or 5 guys on her own. Our boy says he understands, but he's still not used to the fact that his online friend turned out to be such a beautiful girl. She gets flustered, asking if he's talking about her, and starts lightly hitting a wall, telling him not to say such things without thinking. However, the girl is so strong that she causes the structure to collapse. She rushes to save him, and he thinks that dying like this wouldn't be so bad. And with that, she falls right on top of him. How many ribs broke? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of his ribs. She apologizes, explaining that she has a special physique with superhuman strength and dense bones. She never imagined that falling on him would cause so much damage. Our boy prepares a technique and tells her to calm down, assuring her he can handle it. He reflects that it's a good thing he practiced those techniques, or he would have definitely died. Then her phone buzzes with a message, and she says her first request has finally arrived. She shows him an app called Xiaxiang and asks if he's familiar with it. He asks if it's the app where you can post missions for cultivators and warriors to duel over. After completing the mission, they earn the offered reward and accumulate hero points. She confirms and says her ultimate dream is to become the greatest heroine of all. She then shows him the mission, which is to take down someone who stole another man's girlfriend. She shows him the phone, and he says a bastard like that deserves to die. But then she asks why the target looks so much like him. Without hesitation, she almost slashes his head off. He dodges and tells her to calm down, insisting he'd never do something like that. But she ignores him and says since it's her first mission, she can't fail, so he better stop dodging. She goes for a kick, but he sidesteps and asks why she's trying to kill her friend like this. Motivated, she just tells him to stop dodging and turn into the hero points she needs. He dodges again, and she seems puzzled by how he's always avoiding her attacks. The protagonist thinks that in his life, no woman ever comes easy, but since she wants to do things this way, he won't hold back. He uses instant step to appear behind her and prepares to use the Dao fist, almost blowing her away. She realizes she made a mistake trying to kill this guy. With that, she gets scared, and he earns the soul shock technique. This ability stuns the opponent, making them obey him for a while. Xiaotu says her grandfather always told her that China has many hidden dragons, and now she sees there's no way she can defeat him. Yui tries to comfort her, saying not to worry because he's also been training since childhood. He says he only won because he caught her off guard, but she says she doesn't believe that, pointing out that the way he dodged her attacks was strange. She says she'll need to check him out, and he asks what she means by that. She starts poking his body, saying that if he's been training since childhood, there should be some marks. She lifts his shirt, telling him not to resist because he doesn't have a choice. Later, she asks what's going on because he's only been practicing for 3 months. He admits he thought the abilities he learned were special but never imagined they'd be this powerful. Of course, we know he's only been practicing for 3 days, but he decides not to tell her that. Xiaotu says with such talent, she can't wait to see what her grandfather thinks of him. Yui asks if she can figure out who was trying to kill him and assures her that she can trust he believes in true love and would never be disloyal. She says it's not possible to directly see who sent it, but she can try to set up a meeting. The scene shifts to a van parked on the street with some men stepping out. A guy with gold earrings asks if the girl managed to complete her mission. Xiaotu says yes, and he can do whatever he wants with the boy. Meanwhile, our protagonist finds it odd since he's never seen these people before. The man congratulates Xiaotu, saying she'll get a 5-star review. At that moment, Yui asks the man if he's made a mistake since they've never met. But the man asks if Yui has already forgotten him after using him. Then he orders his men to take Yui down. 2 more guys show up carrying something suspicious. The man with the earrings says that today they'll take everything from the boy. One of them says he's handsome, so they'll enjoy doing whatever they want with him. Yui quickly realizes that either these people are acting in bad faith or they're being manipulated. He decides this is the perfect moment to use the technique he just acquired. He activates the soul shock technique and orders them to find out who sent the mission and deal with them instead. Xiaotu asks if he's just going to let those people go. He replies that for now, it's the best solution. On the way home, she says she wanted to spend more time with him today, but unfortunately, she's getting calls and needs to leave. The protagonist says since she'll be staying in the city for a while, they could meet again later. She waves goodbye, saying they'll see each other soon. He watches as she gets scolded by her sister, wondering what his other friends will think when they find out the old maniac is a girl. Just then, he gets a call on his phone and remarks that she's finally learned to use the device. He answers in jokes that if she's been kidnapped, she should cuff twice. But the Empress responds that using a communication artifact is easy for her. She bluntly states that she wants him to accompany her to buy some clothes. In the next frame, they've already arrived at the store and Yui is handing money to the taxi driver for the trouble Lin caused. When he suggested they stop a taxi, she kicked one of them, saying she was just following his instructions. He sighs and says whatever, then asks why she suddenly wants to buy so many clothes. She replies that she doesn't feel like wearing someone else's clothes forever. The store clerk asks if he's there to buy clothes for his girlfriend. Yui knows this is a sales tactic to charge more later and clarifies that he's just there to carry her bags. Some guys nearby comment that it's impossible for someone like him to be dating a beauty like her. The clerk brings out a light dress, saying she'll love it, and then shows a Gucci jacket, claiming it never goes out of style. She asks Yui what the clerk is talking about. He explains that each outfit in his world is suited for different situations. She nods, saying she understands, and then asks if they have any tight latex outfits. The clerk looks awkward and asks what she's talking about. Confused, she looks at Yui and says she saw on his computer that he always searches for that kind of thing. Embarrassed, Yui tries to explain to the clerk that she means his superhero style, something strong-looking. That's why she mentioned latex. But the Empress says she only thought of wearing it because she assumed it was trendy since he always looked at it. But apparently, he doesn't want her to try it on. The nosy guys nearby are trying to figure out the relationship between the bag carrier and her. Meanwhile, Yui asks the clerk to bring something more appropriate. She agrees and the Empress goes to change. She comes back wearing the outfit. The clerk immediately compliments her, saying she looks stunning. The Empress says it's similar to what she used to wear in her world and asks Yui what he thinks. The clerk explains it's from their vintage collection. She comments that she wanted something more classic and thinks it looks perfect. The Empress stands in front of the mirror and decides to buy it. Then she points to Yui, saying she'll pick something for him too. He's confused about why, but in the next scene, we see the protagonist looking almost exactly the same. No major changes. However, the Empress, who seems to grow more confident by the minute, tells Yui that he looks quite stylish. He asks why she insisted on buying something for him too. She explains that the Lin family sent a message about a banquet in a few days. She makes the payment and says she thought it would be a good opportunity to learn more about this world. That's why she invited him to accompany her here. But then the cashier says her account doesn't have enough balance. Yui finds this odd considering the Lin family account should have unlimited funds. He then offers to pay for it himself. He knows he'll need to live frugally for 2 months, but he feels it's worth it. Except the total came to 38,000 and the boy is devastated. Later, she's trying another drink and comments that it's bland compared to Coke. Yui tells her he checked her account and noticed a large transfer to a public account. To resolve it, they could contact manager Zheng, but she says she's not particularly worried about money. He explains that money is quite valuable and questions if she truly doesn't care. She replies that if he's so concerned from now on, he'll manage her money. He's confused and asks how he's supposed to make his own money. That's when she says that all the money she has will also be his. He's immediately overjoyed considering her wealth, but realizes this means he'll belong to her from this moment on and can never escape. Blushing, he says he understands but adds that there are still a few things to clarify. Suddenly, she looks to the side and remarks that those people had disappeared. Apparently, they were sharper than she expected. He mentions that he also felt like someone was watching them earlier but thought it was just his imagination. She acknowledges his sharp instincts and tells him he can handle it if he wants. Meanwhile, in an alley, a bald man angrily asks why their plan is being cancelled when it was almost complete. A man with brown hair says the boy was supposed to be eliminated because he witnessed Lin's car accident. But since she's alive, there's no reason to kill him anymore. The bald man, furious, asks if they won't avenge the 3 brothers they lost. The bespectacled man beside him says that issue will be dealt with sooner or later. Later, at the company, a man hands over some papers, saying Miss Lin made some payments. Once those payments are reimbursed, they'll have the money. The only catch is that the new contract requires a fresh signature, and he asks if Yui can handle it. The problem is that Yui isn't great with numbers. He remembers that the Empress said her money belongs to him now. He wishes that were true since it would make his life easier for the next 10 years. He tells the man to hand over the papers, and the man agrees, but that he piles on another stack and then another, explaining that these are for upcoming contracts. The chubby man offers to help, commenting that there are indeed a lot of them. But Yui doesn't want to be tricked and decides it's better to handle it himself. He asks if he just needs to compare the orders in the system. The man confirms and leaves, saying to call if he needs help. Outside, Shonen asks how it went. The man responds that Yui doesn't trust him. The two laugh oddly, saying that's perfect. If the chubby guy had handled the files, he could have been blamed for any errors. But now that Yui is doing everything alone, he'll be the only one held accountable, especially since he doesn't realize the lists on his desk are all wrong. Obviously, it'll take him forever, and he'll still mess everything up. Shonen praises the man, saying he did a great job turning the tables. The chubby guy comments that since the company is going through a tough time, if Yui makes mistakes, he'll definitely be fired. Even if the president wants to keep him around, they can convene a shareholder meeting and he'll inevitably be expelled. The blonde man says that as soon as they release the explicit video they recorded of Yui, he'll be ruined. But then the secretary appears, saying there's a group of people who want to talk to him. The men from the alley arrive, holding something dangerous in their hands. The secretary asks if he knows them. He says yes, so there's no need to worry, and he tells her not to interfere or call the police no matter what happens. She reassures him that she'll keep the secret. Shonen approaches the men and tells them to talk upstairs. Meanwhile, the secretary wonders what they're planning. As soon as the door closes, she hears a lot of strange noises. Shonen is shouting, saying that it won't fit in this space. The secretary thinks he might be in danger, but remembers he told her not to interrupt. Suddenly, a moan is heard from the room, and she comments to herself that the rich really know how to have fun. Back to Yui, the poor guy is exhausted. Nothing is adding up, and the system's data seems wrong. He decides to recalculate, convinced this time it'll work. Just then, his phone rings. It's the Empress, scolding him and demanding to know why he hasn't come home yet with food. Feeling awkward, he asks why she didn't just order delivery since it'll take him a while. But she warns him he has 1 minute to be at the door or he'll get a beating. The scene shifts to a restaurant. The Empress comments that the food in this world isn't bad at all. Yui asks if she wants to try some pork intestine noodles. She immediately refuses, so he questions why she hasn't mastered the delivery app yet, or maybe she has and just wanted to eat with him. Out of nowhere, she chokes but quickly changes her expression, claiming there were too many options on the app so she couldn't decide. He says he understands, and she sits down asking how work was today. He explains that he was reviewing some financial papers, but nothing was working out. She suggests it might have been a lack of focus, but he insists manager Zhang must have messed something up. He smiles and says they should eat first since the food is delicious. Suddenly, a bald man at a nearby table shouts that he's sure this isn't pork intestine. Yui is startled, wondering why the man didn't mention this earlier. The Empress looks confused. Yui watches as the restaurant manager approaches and asks the bald man why he's shouting. The man insists that this clearly isn't intestine. The manager tells him to stop defaming the restaurant without evidence. The Empress asks Yui where he's going as the bald man threatens to shut the place down. That's when Yui steps in, places a hand on the man's shoulder, and asks the manager if the bald man's claim is true. He picks up the troublemaker and warns that he'll need compensation for spending his money there. The manager denies any wrongdoing, but Yui, trying to get a confession, says the food tasted odd and threatens to beat the man if he doesn't come clean. Finally, the cook admits that the intestines are made from fermented beans. Naturally, everyone demands their money back. When Yui sits back down, the Empress remarks that in her kingdom, the manager would face divine punishment. But she finishes her meal and says at least her order tasted good, so they'll let it slide. The protagonist pieces things together, realizing that Zhang might be substituting genuine products with something cheap to deceive him. The next day, Yui is back at the office. Zhang approaches and asks if he finished the documents. Yui replies that he has and already sent them to the investors. Suddenly, Zhang exclaims that this is terrible news. He apologizes, claiming he made a mistake. He forgot to update the supplier list and used old pricing. He shouts for everyone to hear that if Yui signed and sent those documents, the company will lose millions. Some other employees join in, saying this will impact the entire company. Shaman shows up, asking what mistake Yui made this time. However, it seems Shaman had a rough night. He's visibly in pain, clutching his lower back. Zhang asks if he's okay. Our boy just smiles, saying he's curious about all this commotion. Shannon then says that because of Yui's mistake, no one in the company will get their bonus this month. The rest of the employees get angry, saying they were counting on that bonus. The blonde man says that since Yui is now the president's representative, he'll have to explain this to everyone. Yui then reveals that all the contracts had been sent with the correct prices, so there's nothing to worry about. Shannon looks confused by this no-problem claim. Yui shares the numbers, telling them to take a look. When Zhang checks, he confirms that the numbers are indeed correct. Yui then points out that Zhang's mistake almost cost everyone their bonus, so it's only fair that he provides an explanation. Embarrassed, Zhang admits he made a big mistake, but thanks to Brother Liu, the company avoided a major loss. Shaman interjects, saying that although Zhang made an error, no real harm was done. That's when Yui stands up and says Master Shaonan doesn't seem to be feeling too well. He places a hand on Shaonan's shoulder, shoves him into a chair, and tells him to sit for a moment. Yui adds that he's more curious about why all the company's money is in Shaonan's account. The employees shout, saying now it makes sense why their bonuses have been disappearing. Shaonan tries to lie, claiming he has no idea where the money went and that he wouldn't even invest in this company if it weren't for President Lin. But Yui just tells him to stop lying. Cornered, Shaonan admits he remembers now. It was Zhang who transferred money from his account because he needed it. He insists they just need to talk to Zhang to get the money back. Yui remarks that it's great to see his friend Shaonan repenting for his mistakes and exposing the cowards. But Shaonan, seething with rage, mutters that he wants to kill this damn guy. Meanwhile, the employees grab their keyboards. Yui tells them they know what to do. Naturally, the manager gets beaten up, with everyone shouting that this is why they always have to do overtime. Our boy then gets a message from the Empress, who, as usual, is starving. That's when he remembers that today is the Lin family banquet. The scene shifts to the Lin family mansion, where a man named Lin Wei is getting ready. He's the brother who previously tried to kill the Empress. A maid approaches him, informing him that the guests have arrived. Then the protagonist and the Empress appear. Yui comments that the place is truly a spectacle. However, she doesn't seem impressed and asks if the Lin family isn't supposed to be more prominent. Yui says that to him. The party seems very luxurious. But she retorts that she doesn't see a single can of Coke around. At that moment, Wei approaches the Empress and says their grandmother was worried she wouldn't attend. She completely ignores him. Confused, Wei asks why she's not speaking and why she's acting so distant toward her brother. Yui steps forward and explains that she hasn't been feeling well since the car accident. Wei asks who he is. The protagonist introduces himself as the president's assistant. Suddenly, Wei offers her a glass of wine and points out that the heads of Pan Industries and Fixu Industries are nearby. He suggests she go entertain them. With that, he leaves. The Empress asks Yui who that man is. He explains that, in theory, he's supposed to be her brother, but he's not entirely sure. What he does know is that this guy is under 30 and already the head of the Lin family. The company she owns is just one branch of the family's holdings. The Empress says the place is boring and has an atmosphere she doesn't like. She then looks at the glass of wine and comments that at least it looks good. Before Yui can stop her, she drinks it all. Immediately, she asks if that was alcohol and why it's so strong. Yui explains that modern distillation techniques have improved a lot, so the alcohol is much stronger. She looks a bit disheartened, wishing for a Coke. Yui notices a blonde passing by with a tray and asks if there's any Coke around. She says no because high-end VIPs only drink this kind of cocktail. The two laugh, wondering what kind of bumpkin would want Coke at an event like this. One of them says not to say that. He might be someone important if he's attending this event. But the other replies that it's impossible, and he's probably just a kid Miss Lin brought along. After all, she's already heard rumors that Lin Maok is expected to marry someone from the Pan family at this banquet. Now Yui understands why the Empress was invited to this. He notices that in the meantime she's been called to a table. A man with purple hair says that the higher a woman climbs, the less she's worth. Another man sitting across from him says that's a harsh thing to say and suggests he drink instead. But the purple-haired man asks if he's wrong, saying a woman should focus on staying beautiful and finding a good husband. The other man asks if he has someone in mind. He replies that he's not very interested after seeing his father's 12th wife run off with his money. However, he mentions that his father is still strong, only 60 years old and ready to have more kids. He tells the Empress that he's always advised his father that low-class women aren't worth it. But someone like her from the Lin family must have blood good for something. He places a hand on her shoulder and asks what she thinks of his offer. Meanwhile, Yui is worried since he knows everyone at this event is influential in the city. But seeing Lin angry, he decides he doesn't care about that. He grabs the idiot's arm and twists it. The man, panicking, asks if Yui knows who he is and demands to be let go. While Lin wonders what he's doing, Yui seizes the chance to shock everyone. The man breaks free and asks who Yui is and if he's lost his mind. Our boy introduces himself as Miss Lin's assistant and says he's doing the man a favor. But the man points at Yui and says if he doesn't explain himself properly, he'll have serious problems. Yui makes up a story about being a doctor and claims the man's wrist nerves were damaged. The man isn't that gullible, though, and asks if that's how Yui plans to play it. He calls over his bodyguard and tells him to take care of this. He also tells everyone to watch and see what happens when someone messes with the Pan family. Yui tells him to stop stalling and come in already. The bodyguard charges at him, promising Yui will regret his words soon enough. But Yui easily dodges the first punch. He remarks that while the man's boxing skills aren't refined, they're enough to deal with someone like this. With a punch to the face, the man goes down. Meanwhile, the Pan family man says the bodyguard was a level 3 cultivator. The people at the table murmur that someone that strong would stand out anywhere in Jiang City. So who exactly is this kid? With everyone shocked, Yui activates the system and receives a rejuvenation medicine. Then an elder from the Lin family shows up and asks Yui what's going on. Yui explains about the bodyguard fight, and the elder mutters that Maok must be losing her mind. The Pan family man asks if this is how they treat their guests. The elder, visibly flustered, apologizes and promises they'll handle it. But the Pan family man simply says to forget about any alliance through marriage. Strangely, the Empress tells Yui she thinks he'll benefit from all this. Yui, startled, wonders if she knows about the system. Feeling awkward, he says he only did it because he doesn't like sexist comments. But the Empress isn't easily fooled and says she's certain there's more to it. Suddenly, the elder points at her and demands an explanation, accusing her of disrespecting the family. He claims they never cared about her lowly origins, raised her with difficulty, and gave her everything. So why is she repaying them like this? Lin turns to Yui and asks who this man is. Yui replies that he has no idea. He's probably just some random elder from the family. The man continues shouting, saying that the family is prominent but has been humiliated because of her, and she better apologize to the young master of the Pan family. Yui tells her to stay calm and that he'll handle it, but she ignores him and asks the uncle if they really consider themselves noble and elegant, because to her, they're just people without virtue who only care about appearances. From the conversation she overheard, she had already figured out they only cared about superficial fame and contributed nothing of real value. She continues her tirade, leaving the uncle speechless, but she asks if she said anything untrue. She adds that if they're waiting for her to apologize, they should save that request for her coffin. The humiliation is so great that the poor man collapses, hitting his head on the floor. The uncle gets up and says she must be losing her mind to say such things, but she simply states that if they'll excuse her, she's leaving. However, the uncle warns that everything given to her will be taken away, and she'll be expelled from the family. At that moment, another man nearby interjects, asking them to wait. He introduces himself to Yui and asks if he can get to know him better. Approaching Yui, he says he has remarkable skills and wants to know who his master is. The protagonist replies that the martial world is complex and diverse, and it's not convenient to delve into the details of his life. But then Wee steps in and tells the guests that having the support of a martial group like them would be excellent. He asks Yu to explain himself, who only says it's not that he doesn't want to. It's just that technically he's never had a formal master. The best he can say is that he received some guidance from a few notable figures. Lin Wei calms everyone down, saying today isn't the time to discuss business. He just wants to know about Yui's relationship with Lin Maok. He explains that until now, he's only ever seen her with one other person, but seeing her accompanied by such a talented young man reassures him as her brother. The man nearby mock Lin Wei, saying earlier he was ready to marry her off to anyone just to form alliances. The Empress says she's tired of all this chatter and that it's time to leave. They head out while Wei waves them off, saying he won't interfere any further. Suddenly, a waitress approaches, saying someone's phone is ringing. But Miyoko notices something, points to the waitress, and tells her to come closer. She orders her to buy 5 cases of Coke, not just for her home, but for all the Lin family residences. Her brother looks confused, trying to figure out what she's doing. Miyoko tells him to ask the waitress why she was whispering about the guests. Yui remembers it was the same waitress who called him poor earlier. To avoid losing his sister's favor, Wei immediately orders the waitress to fetch all the Coke, even if she has to go on foot. Later, they're at a street food stall and Yui comments that there's nothing like a late-night snack. Holding her Coke, Miyoko says it would be even better if it were cold. Yui offers her a beer, saying it pairs perfectly with the food here. She asks what it is, and he explains that it's an alcoholic beverage with different flavors. She tries it and says it's quite different from the drinks of her time, yet somehow similar to Coke. However, she makes it clear that she'd never trade Coke for this. The protagonist starts thinking that drinking from the same can would be an indirect kiss and rushes off, saying he'll grab a new straw. Meanwhile, she notices 2 men nearby threatening a young woman. They tell her she probably doesn't want her boyfriend to find out about this. Her family owes a lot of money, but if she comes with them, the debts can be cleared quickly. The Empress quietly observes. The woman protests, saying she doesn't want to. One man warns her she has no choice now. Another man begins pushing her, saying they'll be quick, until he gets a bottle smashed in his mouth. He falls to the ground and asks who it was. It was the Empress, who asks if he wasn't in the mood for a drink. The men approach, saying that the wretch is pretty bold, but watching her eat, one of them comments that drinking with her would actually be a good time. 10 seconds later, he's fleeing in desperation, calling for help. Everyone is beaten up, and the poor guy is crying that the woman is a monster. But she steps on him and asks why he's leaving so soon. She says she was only going to press all of his meridians and drain his energy, or maybe force his body to accumulate internal energy until it exploded. The poor man is sobbing, saying he just wants to escape from her. Yui approaches and asks what they did to provoke her. She replies that it was nothing serious. She just wanted to teach them a lesson. Meanwhile, the schoolgirl thanks them for saving her from the loan sharks. She explains to Yui that she was being threatened when his friend stepped in. The shop owner interrupts, wanting to know who will pay for the damage. Suddenly, the police arrive. As they start arresting the men, they accuse the woman of breaking everyone's bones. Yui knows this could cause problems and asks the girl if she can testify to what she just told him. But she runs off, saying that if she does, her family will get into trouble. The Empress says it's no problem. Yui retorts that it's easy for her to say, but everyone else here will claim she's guilty. As the police approach, she explains that in situations like this, all they need to do is tell the truth. But Yui grabs her arm, saying that won't work this time, and bolts, yelling that if they stay, they'll be in big trouble. Meanwhile, the poor shopkeeper is left waiting for someone to pay him. Later, while resting on a bridge, Yui remarks that it's a good thing he practiced those techniques, otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to run all that distance. He's convinced she wasn't the villain in this story, but thinks she needs to be more cautious. We then see a glimpse of the Empress's past. Yui explains that in his world, false accusations are commonly used to ruin people. Rumors are always a mix of truth and lies. Since she doesn't like explaining herself and has some ignorance about the world, she'll always end up in trouble. At the rate things are going and with the problems she's causing, she'll become the villain of this world. She simply responds that she doesn't care and isn't very interested. Yui declares that from now on, he'll keep an eye on every word and action she takes. If necessary, he'll ensure she doesn't encounter any problems. Suddenly, the Empress throws herself onto Yui and asks if he wants to go with her to the world she came from. Blushing, Yui asks what she's talking about. She moves closer, grabs his face, and reveals that the true Empress's name is Kimying. In the next scene, they're entering Yui's house. He notices something blonde on the couch and wonders who it is. But as he gets closer, he's startled to find his friend left an inflatable doll on the sofa. He tells her to wait a moment while he cleans up the space. Later, she sits down and he asks about calling her Kimying. The Empress explains that within her body, there's another soul connected to hers. So the body of Lin Meo contains the Empress's soul, but the Empress's soul is also linked to another one. Apparently, at this moment, that connected soul has taken over Kimying's place. She explains that because Lin drank alcohol, the connected soul was able to assume control. She grabs his face and says that if he can help Kimying, she'll owe him forever. She offers to pass all the knowledge she has on to him. Unlike the knave witch that is the Empress, she claims to possess immense knowledge. Yui is still confused, trying to figure out where this lunatic is heading with this. He asks how he can help her. She says she needs help removing the seal on her shoulder. Grabbing his arm, she tells him she'll teach him the technique to remove it, or at least lessen its effects. Our boy says it's fine. He'll try to help, but she doesn't need to worry about paying him back in any way. He asks if all he needs to do is strike the seal with energy, and she says yes. Instead, he strikes her to see if she'll faint, muttering to himself that this body-swapping business is getting out of hand. The scene shifts to the Lin family knocking on the door of a house. A purple-haired woman answers, saying they should have received the message that the master wouldn't be showing up tonight. Lin Wei reassures her they won't take much of her time, explaining that Master Wang has arrived in the city and they prepared a banquet. However, they notice that another elder didn't attend and got concerned he might have health issues. The woman says the master is fine and they don't need to worry. She closes the door in his face, leaving Lin Wei frustrated because he just wanted to deliver a message. The group grumbles that the old man is really complicating their lives. Lin Wei advises them to calm down, reminding them that no one in the city can oppose Master Wang. He leaves, urging them not to damage their relationship with the Wang family. The woman re-enters the house and tells the master she sent the visitors away. He thanks her, saying he could have met them but preferred to spend time with his granddaughter. That granddaughter, Xiao, asks why he's treating her like this. Her grandfather says it's because she kept talking about losing to a young man who had practiced far less than she had. She apologizes but insists that Yui is impressive and her grandfather will understand when he meets the boy. Back at Yui's house, the Empress remarks she never thought she'd have a day like this. Yui says it's thanks to modern alcohol. She notices a bruise on her forehead and asks what happened. He dodges the question, saying she must have accidentally hit her head somewhere. He hands her something to drink, joking that he didn't expect her to have such a low tolerance. She explains it's because she's experienced few things in this mortal body. As she goes to drink, Yui asks about the two personalities and the person named King Ming. The Empress spits out the drink and asks if he really met King Ming. Yui says yes and explains that the woman introduced herself as a spirit trapped in her body, seeking help to escape. The Empress confirms it's true. King Ming is a spirit she imprisoned in an artifact to continue strengthening it. Yui asks if she's serious and wonders how someone steals another person's spirit. The Empress explains it involves peeling the person's skin while they're still alive, extracting spinal fluid and using endless torture to separate the soul from the body and seal it in an artifact. She then asks Yui if he regrets saving the wrong person. He relaxes and says no, he made the right choice. At least by helping her, he knows what she wants. But with King Ming, he has no clue what her intentions are. The Empress says he made a wise decision because if King Ming had awakened, she would have killed him. Yui wonders what she's talking about and why he feels like she's deceiving him. Now she complains about pain in her shoulder and Yui, ever opportunistic, offers to give her a massage. But then his friend Wu walks in, sees the two, and accuses Yui of lying about working late when he's clearly home. Wu notices that Yui brought the Empress and immediately says he'll leave so they can have the place to themselves. However, he grabs Yui before leaving, asking if he's doing adult things in front of the doll on the couch. Yui shoves him away, telling him to stop leaving the inflatable doll lying around. The Empress, meanwhile, is calmly eating the food Wu brought. Wu asks if she's really Yui's boss. When Yui confirms it, Wu starts enthusiastically offering her things. He rummages in a drawer and asks her to wait a moment. Pulling out a suspicious bag, he says it contains some sweets he bought 3 days ago and wants to give them to her. Yui asks why Wu hid the sweets inside a dirty sock. The Empress watches them argue, saying it seems oddly familiar. Later, Wu was on his knees pleading with Yui, saying he wants to attend a famous celebrity's show tomorrow. The problem was that the tickets were sold out, but Wu knew she worked for the Lin Corporation. Yui tells him to stop following these internet celebrities, reminding him of the last time he maxed out his credit card. But Wu replies that Yui will never understand what true love is. He claims he supports her without expecting anything in return. Yui only responds that he knows his friend too well. Wu then shows a picture of the artist and promises not to worry. He'll make sure Wu gets a ticket. Sometime later, the Empress is writing some talismans. Wu asks if she's crazy, and Yui casually explains that she went to the Longhu Mountains and enjoys doing this. Miok hands him one and tells him to inject true energy into it. But Yui, being cautious, wants to know what it does first. She explains that it's something simple to help him gather more energy. Since he's about to advance, it could be very useful. He asks if the heavens will punish him for using it, and she replies that he's far from being important enough to attract that kind of attention. She then stands up and says she'll also cultivate as she can't afford to waste time. Yui thinks this is the perfect chance to go see internet celebrity with his friend. The next day, the event is happening. Dong from work, the obvious scapegoat, was the one who got the tickets for Yui. He hands them over and leaves, telling Yui to have fun. Wu thanks him, calling him a true brother. At the venue, Yui asks what the event is about. Wu explains that it's to promote urban harmony for a day, but he quickly adds that the actual event doesn't matter. What matters is what's on stage. The celebrity thanks everyone for supporting her so much. Wu asks Yui if she isn't the cutest thing he's ever seen. Yui agrees but adds that a woman shouldn't rely solely on her looks. The girl overhears this and doesn't seem pleased. Then another man comes on stage and she says they must support all vendors and build a better city together. She takes off her sandal and walks for the man as if planning something sinister, saying that those who don't listen to advice deserve punishment. Wu, naturally, starts yelling that he wants to be punished too. The man on the ground seems to be enjoying himself, and Yui remarks that something about this is off. Suddenly, the man bites her foot, and the girl asks if he's not an actor. Yui flings Wu forward, saying he'll help him. The man continues devouring her foot until Wu crashes into him, telling him to back off. The two men exchange glares for a second before they both get punched in the face. The crowd rushes forward, yelling not to touch Yan Yan. But Yan Yan ignores everyone and approaches Yui, thanking him for helping in time. Emotional, she says that if it weren't for him, she doesn't know what would have happened. Wu, already smitten, murmurs that her charm is hard to resist. However, the people nearby notice someone else holding her hand and rush forward, telling Yui to let go. Yui tries to explain that something's wrong, but he also can't seem to let go. Yan Yan asks if she's stronger than he expected, while Yui wonders why she's messing with him. She finally releases his hand and says she's sure he can handle it. But Yui doesn't want to get involved in this madness and bolts. Later, he's in an alley, exhausted from running away from these lunatics. That's when a man in a suit appears, saying he's finally found him. Yui asks the man to be reasonable, explaining that he didn't do anything wrong. It's Yan Yan who's crazy. But before he can finish, the man merely slashes his throat. Yui asks who he is, but the man is more interested in how Yui dodged the attack. Now he's convinced Yui is involved in the death of the old man's son. Yui realizes the man has the same energy as those who attacked him before. He charges at the man using instant step to get behind him and landing a punch that sends him into the wall. Yui approaches, one hand in his pocket, and says he left him with a few intact ribs because he needs some information. Suddenly, Yui is nearly hit by a black orb and thrown back. A bald man appears and asks why Yui is so fast. Two others show up behind him, saying it's better to eliminate them together and split the reward later. Yui isn't sure he can handle 3 opponents at once. Just then, Wu shows up, saying he's finally found him and thanks him for throwing him onto Yan Yan. But then, Wu notices all the men surrounding them and asks if he arrived at the wrong time. The bald man replies, "No, you came at the perfect time." Wu is almost crushed, screaming for help and asking what's going on. Yui lands a hit on the bald man but knows things just got harder since he now has to protect someone else. He tells Wu to run toward him, but 2 more men appear, declaring no one will leave alive. Suddenly, a cloud of smoke fills the air. In the confusion, one of the men accidentally knees his ally. He apologizes and the other tells him to be careful. Looking around, they can't find where Yui and Wu went. Yan Yan suddenly appears and rescues Yui. A while later, they're all exhausted and Yan Yan says this spot is safe enough. She explains that those men are from the Martial Legion but wouldn't dare to pursue them here. Wu is sprawled on the ground, muttering that he can't believe he was saved by his goddess. Yui introduces himself to Yan Yan and says he owes her a favor. But she simply asks him not to tell anyone about this because she doesn't want to gain a reputation. Wu, now smitten, wonders how he ever thought for a moment she might be a demon. Suddenly, Yan Yan changes her expression and asks if he can hear it. Yui asks, "Hear what?" She says, "Obviously, it's the sound of your heartbeat." She explains that he was just saved by an adorable, modest girl with a good heart who asks for nothing in return. Surely, you must be thinking she's perfect as a future wife. That's why his heart is racing. At that moment, Yui realizes this girl is insane. Later, at the park, Yui asks why, if she's so skilled, she didn't fight back against the guy on stage. She explains that it's company policy. She has to appear vulnerable and weak. That's the only way to be someone everyone wants to protect. Yui thinks to himself that his poor friend is always being deceived. He brushes it off and asks about the martial artists' legion. Yan Yan is surprised he doesn't know and explains it's a group of assassins who, of course, use martial arts. They're a well-known underground organization, but if he wants to know more, he'll have to attend more of her events. She offers him a discount if he does. She even says she'll give him 20% off if he decides quickly. Too late. Yui is already back in the city, realizing he needs to grow stronger because of this strange legion. He remembers Miyok mentioning he'll need a spiritual jade and decides to call her. She tells him to go to a jade shop, inject energy into the stones, and he'll know which one is spiritual. Before he can say more, she says she has to get back to her practice and hangs up. Yui remembers he earned a reward for shocking those guys in the alley. It seems to be a penetration technique, though he has no idea what that means. To test it, he uses it and looks at a woman, realizing it's a visual penetration technique that lets him see her skeleton. Unimpressed, he complains that the system seems to want to turn him into an orthopedic doctor. Later, the scene shifts to an antique market. Some men watch as Yui injects energy into jade pieces, purifying them in the process. The shopkeeper asks if he has some kind of jade fetish, since he's drooling over them. Yui asks about the price. The shopkeeper praises his eye for quality and says that piece of jade is worth 2 million. Awkwardly, Yui responds that the jade is still full of impurities, so he'll check out other places. As he leaves, he mutters that the guy robs customers more than a bank does. Suddenly, Xiaotu sees Yui and asks what he's doing there. He explains that he's searching for a jade amulet, and she says it's a coincidence since they are too. She introduces him to her grandfather, saying this is the guy she talked about the other day. Yui greets the old man, who introduces himself as Wang. Wang mentions he heard from Xiaotu about how strong Yui is and how he defeated her in a fight. For that reason, he'd like to invite Yui to a duel. However, Yui immediately wants to decline, saying the old man is exaggerating. Wang apologizes, saying he got curious and acted unpredictably. Xiao Tu tells them they're leaving and says they can play when they get the chance. As Yui watches the old man walk away, Wang suddenly tries to punch him, but Yui is ready. Yui asks if Wang isn't too old to be using dirty tricks like this, while Xiao Tu looks alarmed, asking what her grandfather is doing. Wang tears his shirt as his muscles swell, saying he won't let anyone steal his granddaughter's admiration. He tells Yui to prepare, as today he'll experience the strength of wisdom. They prepare briefly before Wang launches a flurry of punches at Yui. Xiao Tu pleads with her grandfather to calm down, saying it's not that serious. But Yui replies that now he has to fight for his dignity. Wang compliments Yui's skills, but says he's still far from deserving Xiao Tu's admiration. Xiao Tu runs off, saying she'll have to find Sister Ling to stop this. Wang leaps at Yui, activating a flaming punch. Yui manages to block it, but struggles to find an opening for a counterattack. Then he remembers the penetration technique. As Wang closes in, asking if Yui can't keep up, Yui combines the penetration technique with the celestial fist and lands a punch squarely on Wang's weak spot. The combination of techniques works better than Yui expected, and the system congratulates him, unlocking the penetration fist. Yui charges at Wang, saying it's time for a counterattack. Wang grins, saying they'll settle this with a punch. Yui notices that Wang's weak spot is on his shoulder, but unfortunately, Wang dodges. Wang mocks him, asking if he's running out of energy. Wang lands a solid hit on Yui's stomach, making him cough up blood and collapse. Wang dusts off his hands, saying Yui needs more practice. Time passes and Yui wakes up wondering what happened. Suddenly, a figure in peculiar clothing approaches. It's the Empress. She remarks that she never imagined he likes sleeping on the streets. Yui, embarrassed, gets up and asks why she's there. She explains she heard about something being refined in the furnace and wanted to check it out. She crouches dangerously close to Yui and starts unbuttoning his shirt. She says she's just checking for internal injuries and concludes he's fine. Standing up, she advises him to learn the lesson that not every enemy can be defeated. That's why he needs to choose his battles more wisely. Yui tries to explain that he had no choice since the old man attacked him first. He recalls noticing an injury on Wang's shoulder during the fight and thinking about targeting it. However, he decided to miss on purpose because injuring the old man too severely could ruin his reputation. He notices that she seems slightly concerned about him and asks if she's afraid of losing her disciple. She responds by telling him not to touch her with his dirty hands. Meanwhile, Wang is wondering where Yui went. He admits that the boy was stronger than he anticipated, especially that last punch, which felt dangerous. However, Wang is confident that his own abilities are superior and that he dodged Yui's attacks easily, or at least, that's what he thought. His shoulder is completely wrecked regardless. Suddenly, Xiao Tu appears with Sister Ling. Wang looks startled and Ling asks, "Where is the like of—" The scene shifts to the courtyard at Master Huang's house. Inside the room, the elder is taking care of Grandpa. Xiao Tu is asking Lin if Grandpa will be okay, while the doctor explains that he has stopped the flow of energy and removed the danger of death. However, this shoulder injury is from an old illness. The grandpa, all poked up, tells them not to worry. The old man isn't going to die. Meanwhile, Lin thanks the big guy who says he will take his leave, and another person there is already calling for him. I had forgotten that the proportions of that pink girl are peculiar, right? And she is there crying next to Grandpa, worried. However, he tells her to stop that, as he has to prepare for a ranked match. The girl is a bit confused, right? The guy is the king of Summoner's Rift. Ling Ren wants to know if the fight outside was good. Xiao Tu lies, saying it was just a little training for the old man to have fun. However, it's obvious she gets angry, saying the guy fainted during that. The old man tells her to calm down. Everyone already knows she is the one in charge of this family. However, she continues to be angry, saying she's getting older and will no longer be young. Grandpa says, "Oh, my girl, you're about to turn 30. You haven't been young for a long time." However, at that moment, a guy enters announcing that the Lin and Marin have come to visit. The woman is already sure that these guys are plotting something, and the old man tells her to take a look to see what's going on. If anything, just say he hurt his hand and doesn't want to see anyone. However, she knows these guys won't believe that, but still, he turns away. As she leaves the room, the guy behind informs that the young man from the footage was last seen at the stone market. Meanwhile, Xiao Tu, about to explode at any moment, says that he really is stubborn. Besides, it would be good for that boy to keep a low profile and not draw too much attention. Outside, some guys are talking, wanting to know if Master Wang's situation is serious. One of them complains that just when the collaboration was about to work, the old man pulls a stunt like this. The guy wants to join the Lu family, but the friend says it's still too early. Not to mention that the manager was just a really annoying woman and the hair was a girl. The one in the back wants to know, now that the Lu family is being suppressed because of Master Wang, what will happen? That Lin Wai, however, is thinking it's the perfect chance. The guy is about to die and soon someone will take over that leadership. It would be great to be alongside that person. However, the muscle-bound guy named Song Abio says he brought some pills for the master, and he calls the team, saying it would be good for them to visit old Wang. Everyone is suspicious. Everyone knows this guide is from the rival faction. And at that moment, two guards appear and say that at this time, no one can enter the chief's courtyard. Abio gets irritated and tells the guys to get out of the way right now. Obviously, a fight is about to break out while everyone watches to see what will be left of the family. Abio advances, saying that if they are refusing the medicine he brought, it's because they want to see the old man dead, and he won't allow that. He tells the group to follow along and starts throwing punches at everyone. Just then, Ling Ren appears at the door carrying a fireball and throws it in the direction of the guys. They are impressed that she actually showed up, and she doesn't seem to want to make friends and wants to know if they are really there to cause trouble. Hey Pao is confused. This damn girl wasn't supposed to be that strong. He all friendly, Miss Ling then, right? I came to say that. However, she just ignores everything he had to say and walks past. Ling warns everyone to leave because the master is fine and doesn't want visitors. But then the big guy looks at himself, and the old man on the left asks what happened to old Wang. Rand makes up that he played all night, had tendinitis, and that's why he can't see anyone. However, the guy from the Pan family is sure it must be something worse than that. At that moment, the guy in the blue suit steps forward and says it's okay, he's just there to inform about something. Alin tells him to say it quickly, and he warns that, unfortunately, the Tian family is having some issues, and that's why their partnership has been cancelled. He asks them to understand while thinking there's no way he's going to be stuck with this dead old man. Ling just replies that it's fine and anyone else who wants to back out is welcome to do so. Obviously, the fake starts saying, "Oh, my business isn't going too well, right? We won't be able to support you." Alin just turns around and says it doesn't matter, she doesn't need their money anymore, and whatever they want can be returned. However, at the same time, she's wondering what the old man is thinking. But in the end, it's obvious. Each of these families has their interests, and at this moment they are not aligned. Meanwhile, the old man is telling Xiao Tu that those who depend on his family always show their true colors in times of difficulty. In the future, she will know whom to trust and who is just self-serving. All twisted, she compliments him, wanting to know if it's his grand plan, while he admits he was afraid of Ling. However, now that he's seen the situation unfold, he has a new plan. The problem is that Ling knows the old man's motives are genuine, and those bastards are just taking advantage. Abio, however, is off to the side thinking that the boss spent decades gathering information and now he will finally be able to test everything. Suddenly, he puts the ball in his mouth and man, it seems he liked it, saying the sensation was incredible. At that moment, he's eager to discover the truth about Boss Lu when, out of nowhere, the protagonist appears there with the Shadow Pass. The system already detects a crisis, activates the barrier, and the guy is pushed away. Our boy has no idea what's happening. He just showed up out of nowhere and the guy is on the ground. Suddenly, a voice says he finally arrived and everyone recognizes it as the master's fate. They know this is the ability of life energy transmission. Meanwhile, Ling wants to know if this is part of the old man's plan. Xiao Tu is already all messy calling for our boy, telling him to come in quickly. Meanwhile, the guys outside want to know why this guy is showing up there again. The scene then shifts to the city hospital where someone is snoring. The blonde kid informs that the uncle's condition was improving, so he's leaving. Luffy, however, his father tells him to stay put and says that whoever did this to his daughter's face will pay dearly. At that moment, the guy in the blue suit appears saying that Abio sent a message saying Shang Ping is fine. And the strangest thing is that it seems all the families were giving respect to a certain Lu Yuwei, whom no one knows. The father says it doesn't matter, he's never heard of him, while the blonde wants to know why again and it's that damn kid. The boss tells him to explain who this fool is. Meanwhile, Ling is telling our boy to come in. He comes in all smiles, telling them to wait a little because a friend of his is arriving. The buff guy, poor thing, falls to the ground all beaten up, saying nothing would stop him from serving Boss Lu. However, I don't know if it's a trick or a favor, but our dear boss arrives, stepping on the fool's head. Wow, she's grown, telling our boy that he deserves a divine punishment. The protagonist makes a Naruto run and takes off. All awkward, he asks if she wasn't in a hurry. King Niang, however, was standing there looking around, while Ling observes and realizes she can't sense this woman's presence. Indeed, the existence of Lu Yui was not as simple as it seemed. She tells everyone to come in now that his friend has arrived. Already in the room, Xiao Tu sees our boy's new friend and goes to greet her by serving some tea. Even the boss is impressed by how big this girl is. The girl was about to explode, really. The protagonist then asks how the old man feels. He sensed something was wrong in the fight. The old man says yes, he noticed the boy held back in the attack to avoid hurting him. But you need to worry, he will recover. Xiao Tu feels relieved to know that the injury wasn't the protagonist's fault. Ling, however, says it doesn't matter. She should stop playing innocent while doing crap behind everyone's back. At this moment, the boss is looking at a picture on the wall and the old man tells that his family has a long martial tradition and military past. All the ancestors fought to defend the land, and over time the family gained quite a bit of influence. Ling says that this is true and that's why the other families are so interested in him, just because of that kind of influence. Now the protagonist is understanding why this old man has been doing all this. And Ling thinks that the old man connecting Xiao Tu with the boy was part of his plan too. All this to ensure that he wasn't one of the traitors interested only in destroying the family. She believes that the old man, right, made a great fourth-dimensional chess plan, but obviously, right, that doesn't make any sense. And the old man tells our boy that those guys are all wearing masks, while it's much easier to negotiate directly with him. But the protagonist finds all this very suspicious, while the master is already thinking that he will soon be able to control this young man. The old man benefits in the end, and the boy still thanks him. However, Kim comments that to her, the protagonist seemed to be a target. Show 2 doesn't understand. She says that it's fine that the old man had a lot of power, but that was a long time ago and his reputation is fading and everyone is jumping ship. And now he wanted to use the protagonist as a sort of shield. Yui and Ling are there somewhat confused. And the host is already thinking that maybe, really, this made a bit of sense. The protagonist realizes that if he were like a sort of barrier in front of the other family, right, he would reveal all the enemy's weaknesses. While Xiao Tu is angry and asks her grandfather if he was really planning all this, the old man is all scared now, right, wanting to know who this woman is that suddenly showed up. She just appeared and he already had the feeling that she was gigantic, which she is, and why he was being controlled by her. She's just giving him a stare and the old man tries to explain himself, saying that she is going too far. It even seems like the old man would plan all this. In that, he tells our boy that whatever he wants, he just has to ask that they are, friends. And Xiao Tu tells our boy the same thing, saying that she will guarantee any wish. The protagonist stops to think and knows, right, that the Wang family is a lineage of martial artists. So if he wanted some techniques borrowed in any area for him, that would be enough. The old man, however, warns that important techniques like the flaming fist couldn't be shared. And even with Xiao Tu crying, he assures that those can't be passed to anyone. The protagonist said it was fine. Even if they weren't such precious techniques for him, it was more than good. But then Kim comments about some flowers she saw in the garden. She knows they are used in food, and the old man says that yes, they are rare flowers that are cultivated once every 1,000 years. The seeds are very valuable, but he can plant them wherever he wants. The protagonist is somewhat confused while the old man makes the offer. Strangely, the Empress accepts right away and says that's fine then. The protagonist finds it strange because why is she going so far just for a plant that is used for cooking? But what can he do? The woman pressed the W and won't let go, walked away. He waves goodbye to the old man saying he's leaving. Ling criticizes the old man saying that he planned, and when he thought he won, he lost the techniques and also lost some seeds. Xiao Tu, on the other hand, says that the old man has to stop being so selfish. However, he replies that he has to be careful. He can't understand what that woman is about. The scene then shifts to the protagonist's house, where that friend of his from the beginning is enjoying Zion Chan's live stream. He thinks it's the protagonist arriving and says, "Hey, Yue, can you pay the rent this month, buddy?" However, in reality, it's 4 guys on his back, and immediately they grab him and put the kid on his knees. The guys are asking if, this is the loser, while the poor chubby guy warns that it's good to let him go now, otherwise he will have to beat everyone up. The boss, however, just orders to take this kid away now, while the protagonist is in the forest saying that in this place there are enough plants for her to eat for 1 or 2 whole years. But why does she want this so much? The boss says that she is silly to think she is really there just for the food and warns that those carob flowers, I had to translate because I have no idea what that is and still don't know, grew on trunks that were essential for creating pills to boost energy. So the protagonist realizes that the rascal mentioned the flowers, but in fact is there for the trunk, meaning, right, she pulled a fast one on the old man. The protagonist says he understood and asks if this is a way for her to regain the strength she once had. However, she reveals that she is unable to draw energy into her body at all. At this rate, the chances were minimal, and that's why this pill she is refining is actually for our boy. Her plan is to take our boy to that celestial realm, and all she asks is that when he gets strong enough, he also takes her back to her world. Lu Yui was all confused, right? How is he supposed to make her return to her world? None of this makes sense. But then he falls back, saying that sometimes he forgets that she really isn't from this world. She, however, stretches out her hand and asks how the story will work out without a protagonist. The boy, however, knows that if those immortals really existed, they are farther away than humans are from gorillas. He doesn't think he will be able to do it, but she warns that what exists above the celestial are just rumors. And even if the distance were enormous, she trusted him, so he should trust her. She moves closer, the boy is all flushed while she says she will do her best to help. When he reaches that level, crossing the void will be as easy as a hand movement. Then our protagonist already smiled, said that's great, so let's go for it. Oh, my daughter, sideways like that, those giant thighs, right? The scene then shifts to the company Forestry Media, where there's a girl with small gift boxes. A chubby guy says that only Yui could ensure that so many 1,000-year ginsengs were given away for free like that. And another is in shock that there was a VR equipment there, which was a new release. Someone asks Mr. Lin what exactly Yui did to earn all this from the company. He replies that they will have to ask, and just then, our boy is arriving at the door. The moment he opens it, before saying hi, the chubby guy is already wanting to borrow a VR. Everyone is confused, gaining a lot of startled points from everyone. The secretary, who is getting all excited, already informs Wei that several companies came to give him some gifts. The lightbulb head says, "Wow, Wei, you're the man. Don't keep secrets from us." while the fool shaman is in the background saying, "That son of a gun, why?" drawing attention again. Poor protagonist, he just lives his life, and this guy suffers the collateral. The protagonist stops to think and is sure it must just be the old man from the Wang family. And then he tells everyone to grab gifts and thank the bosses at work. Everyone turns to Qiang Niang and Lin and thanks them, saying they are amazing. Xiaonan relaxes, saying, "In the end, this idiot is just any employee. Only he can call Xiaoxian and Kiki." However, in the midst of this blonde guy's breeze, Xiaoxian's brother, right, says that our boy needs to stop being so shy. Several people from the family already want to pair the two up. Now the blonde guy is confused. What do you mean, pair them up? And then the brother also announces, Yui is now the director and largest shareholder of the company. Everyone there is a bit confused and at the same time, congratulating the protagonist. And Lin says that this was the elder's wish and now they don't even need formalities with each other. The protagonist, looking at the boss, just thinks that no one even noticed she's no longer the same person. And the system gives a few more points for him having left everyone at work in shock. Then the giant thigh tells them to leave, but the protagonist asks him to wait, wanting to know where she's going. She just says that staying there is like being near a bunch of flies and her buzzing is annoying. Apparently, she used the guys' names and they are saying that she is really much gentler lately. The poor thing really humiliated everyone, while Shaman is tearing up the floor, wanting to know why everyone is treating Y like this. In the room, the protagonist is asking what else she needs to do the so-called alchemy, that he would fetch everything. However, the tall guy says he doesn't need to worry so much. The most important thing is the shell, so they will focus on lunch. At that moment, his phone rings and on the other line, someone screams for help, saying they have been kidnapped and are at some dark moon bar. Ah, it's the chubby guy from the apartment, and the protagonist says no way he's going. Let that chubby guy get himself in trouble. He just wants to steal my money. However, the friend offers an exclusive fan club CD to convince the protagonist. Our boy is sure his friend wouldn't offer something like that, so he's in a bind. Meanwhile, the fool with the blonde hair is just listening, saying that's what happens to those who offend the Liu family. The scene shifts to the Dark Moon Bar and the bunnies are all excited. On his knees, the chubby guy is there suffering. Wow, man, suffering. Maybe I jumped the gun with my words. When the artist is out of ideas, he doesn't draw the clothes, just painted the body instead. She orders the chubby guy to lift his head, and as soon as he does, she uses a strange power that seems to mess with memories. She asks if he remembers anything, and he replies that he doesn't, because he blacked out when he was kidnapped. She then tells him to tell everything about that certain person without revealing who he is. The guy starts talking about how they are close people, having known each other for a month, when suddenly, a bunny opens the door and tells the madam that Liu Yue has arrived. She then tells them to stall a bit while she finishes extracting the information. At the night farm, the protagonist is entering and the bunnies are hopping around. Even King Niang thinks the clothes are daring, but it's not for nothing, my warrior, you're on another level. The first bunny of his wild territory approaches our boy. From a very curious animal breed, she clings to our boy, clearly showing fear. However, our boy says he's not in the mood for Zootopia today, and he yanks the arm of the fierce one. Oh, what's this? Threw her on the ground and even told her to explain where the so-called god of wealth who rules this place is. And she replies that it's fine since she can't hit him that way. She'll hit him another way, and the muscleheads are arriving. Well, protagonist, it would have been better to take a beating first. Wow, here comes a little green guy teleporting in, throws a punch, and the protagonist disappears. Wow, what's this to? He already hit one, teleported belly first into another, punched the bald guy in the face. The guys are all crooked, while the protagonist activates the new piercing punch and sends everyone flying away. The musclehead is there confused, saying this doesn't make sense, but in a second, the guy already has his hand on his face and bam, goes to the ground. They'd almost crush our boy's big ball. What's this? Get out of here, bald guy, old man. Our protagonist is finding it strange. Why is the Martial Legion hunting him down? And Yue asks the bastard to help while the bald guy tells the bastard to shut up. That's right, the guy said it's fine, but he's going to keep Chnang Nian over there in a corner. Clan doesn't care about you, man. She's sipping a glass of wine calmly. And here goes the fool, right? He wants to get beaten by a hot girl. I don't blame him. He tries, she holds his arm. A glare tells him to break it, and bam, the fool is sent flying. The leader of the Legion is all confused, while Lu Wei smiles and says they shouldn't mess with her. At that moment, King Niang approaches and says that since it was a rescue mission, they needed to be quick. At the same time, the guys realize they are not prepared yet, while the fierce one asks them to show the tricks they have. However, suddenly she feels something strange and falls to her knees weakened. Someone then warns on the communicator that the effects of the powder shouldn't last long. At this, the protagonist realizes there's something in the air, and the bald guy says that now that they are wrecked, it's easy to finish off the two. However, the fierce one pulls him into her lap and she, "Oh my god, what are you doing? Hey babe, relax, I got this. Just stay up there." He lifted her off the ground and placed her there. Charged in, punch. However, the bald guy seems to teleport. When the guy in the red shirt appears next to the protagonist, he unleashes a flurry of punches that looks more like a hurricane of bullets. However, the dude used Killua's technique along with another one. Look, they're spinning around our boy. No one knows where they come from. When suddenly, the two are coming from each side. The guy tries to attack again with a big punch to our boy's face. But now he raises the shield and not even the guy's sword goes deep. Whoa, and the guys took collateral damage, okay. Both went down. The dude is shocked, wanting to know how their physical strength was destroyed like that. Meanwhile, Wei says that despite all their little show, he still has the advantage. The vacuum-packed girl, a beautiful sight, is getting angry seeing the so-called barrier of the Golden Bell, and the protagonist tells them to hand over their friend quickly, or the trouble is going to get serious. But suddenly, a flashback falls to the ground. Whoa, the hand goes to what matters most, throws it in his lap, and let's get out of here. Ma'am, the drawing was of a flashback, but in the end, it was a smoke bomb. This isn't a lack of talent from the artist. This is actually the enemy's technique. He fooled even me. It's incredible. The vacuum-packed girl is there wanting to escape amidst the chaos, while the protagonist holds the good stuff, saying that this is a trap. King Yang says, "You bastard, put me down and take your hand off me." The protagonist gives her another squeeze. So, from here you say what? Ah, okay then, sorry. Put me down. Damn. She then says that this place smells of balm and cassia, which are effective against snakes, and she has a certain technique of the heart of the serpent. That's why it worked. The protagonist realizes that whoever is doing this seems to know exactly who she is, in this case, a reincarnated one. And she says that everything is very strange and it's best to ask the people inside soon. Meanwhile, they interrogate Abio and ask what the Liu family and the Martial Legion are up to. The dude just says he has no idea about the Legion, but the Liu family's target is the woman. The dude asks why. He says they are hunting the Empress. A month ago, they got the job to take her out, and that was it. Ah, the protagonist remembers, right? A month ago was when she took that Hadouken in the car. At that moment, he realizes that the target was actually Lin Maok, the original person of this world. And he wants to know who the client is, but Abio is going to say he doesn't know anything about that, but here, take this lunch remover to the stomach. Meanwhile, the protagonist turns like a plane on the runway and says they are going to investigate the Liu family, while the fool lying on the ground is shouting for help. Outside, the two are already leaving, saying that this Liu family is famous, they might end up wanting revenge. I was going to comment that the friend hasn't been saved yet, but look at the poor guy there, asking for help, saying he hasn't been saved yet. Elsewhere, the waitress is telling Shonen that the person he was looking for has arrived. However, the blonde guy says that the only person he wants to see right now is Hyoki, until our protagonist shows up all beaten up calling for him. He pretends to be dying and says, "Friend, the Martial Legion came to kill me. I don't have much time." Shonen comes over. "Are you sure? You're not fooling me, are you? You're going to die, right? Because finally some plan has to work out. For God's sake, you better die today." Liu Wei ignores him and just says, "The Liu family and the Martial Legion have teamed up. You're the only one left to protect her, shaman." At that moment, the scared little blonde says, "What? The Liu family wants to hit Hyoki? Those bastards, they're going to die now." Immediately, he calls the two lost guards who don't even know what they're doing there and tells them to join forces to resolve this. He also tells our boy to conserve energy while the ambulance arrives, that he will show Hyoki that he is the one who saves her. However, the girl was right there, and she comments that she didn't imagine he had this way with other people. Meanwhile, we see that Gushonen, when he was about to leave, was pulled by a chubby girl into a room. He asks how her recovery is going, and she sits on his lap saying she doesn't feel well. Her heart is warm with his arrival. Meanwhile, he also brings a paper list with the names of the people he is investigating. He goes all excited to grab the list, but she snatches it from his hand and says he'll have to call her Yun. This chubby girl, just like she says, is an investment in Bitcoin. If you put her in the gym, the evolution will be fierce. Is there a good chance she'll leave you after that? Yes, but, well, not anymore. You'll be alone once she gets hot. Shonen is there saying he'll call her dear, and she immediately crushes him. After a lot of beatings he couldn't handle, the poor guy is leaving the hotel looking worn out when our protagonist was off to the side. He grabs him in the alley, shoves a little ball in his mouth, and says this will help him revitalize. Shonen, all scared, wants to know what the fool is doing there if he was supposed to be in the hospital, to which he replies that modern medicine is amazing. He recovered very quickly. Shonen, angry, says he's being deceived and asks for the ambulance money back, but the protagonist wants to know if he found out who was behind all that. The blonde tries to disguise it, saying no, he has no information, but the protagonist knows the guy and slams him to the ground, telling him to reveal everything right away. And he starts searching and finds something with information under his pants. Oh, no, actually what he left was a recorder when this dude was leaving. And then he sees that the Bitcoin chubby girl discovered that the one behind everything was Maok's brother. In other words, the protagonist is in shock that it was that bastard Lin Wei. Wow, that was almost a plot twist, right? The guy acted nice, even though he's always been trash. I really messed up, man. I let myself be fooled. However, Shaman is holding our boy, saying things aren't that simple. Our boy, however, comments that this isn't something for him to get involved in. But the blonde says he can't just pretend he doesn't know anything. Yet the protagonist completely ignores him and rushes out. while Shonen is punching the wall, saying that one day UI will bow to him too. Back in the office, the protagonist is hunting for some information. He discovers that Lin Wei caused a huge loss for the company, and that's why he wants to get rid of his sister to use her as a scapegoat. At that moment, she walks in asking why he didn't just call and let her know. She comes in all red wanting to know what a mere mortal is investigating. The protagonist finds this a bit strange and asks why her face is so red. At that moment, she puts her hand on her forehead and says she has a perfect solution. Right away, the protagonist notices her weird heart-shaped eye. She had been taken over by the other personality. The Sasuke mark even appears on her shoulder. The protagonist is sure of it. However, the fierce one doesn't stop, right? In the recliner, the position is like a chain. And the weird one still says that the last time she tested him, he was kinda out of nowhere. Now he's getting so threatening. To not use another word, right? She says like tough. He's confused, wanting to know what this test business is. And the fierce one explains that she is a soul weapon that is separate from the body, basically another spirit. And it was the witch herself, Mayok, who saved her. In a flashback, we see Mayok all empress-like, right? Looking at a rare artifact. Wow, but she just broke it and said she wasn't interested in that. The moment she broke the dog's soul, there was nowhere to go, right? And she looked for a body to use as a vessel. The fierce one sat down, opened the shells, and started that huge cultivation. She absorbed along with that all the resentment that soul carried. The evil spirit tried to dominate her, and said that if she couldn't handle it, she should just give up and surrender. But obviously, right, she survived and ended up managing to use her as a weapon. The protagonist asks if carrying a soul also means carrying emotions. Kindi, however, just ignores him and holds him, saying they should go somewhere else. Then she shows the ingredients and explains that they are to make the so-called purity pill that will help him. The protagonist replies that he has no idea how to do that, but she takes his hand and says it's really easy. The protagonist asks, "What are you doing, woman?" And then her big hand pulls out an alchemy bucket out of nowhere. Kindi hands over the cauldron, explains that with that he can make the pills by himself. Right away, she tells them to start the process, and sometime later, the protagonist is wondering if it will really be that easy. However, the fierce one there, all out of breath, says that one is not enough. He asks if she's exhausted, and she says it's fine, just a little tired. But here she comes with her precise strikes. Out of nowhere, she who was sitting stumbles in his direction, asking for help. The protagonist, however, doesn't care at all, just puts her on the couch and consumes the pill. At that moment, he is enveloped in a strange golden smoke and realizes he is nearing the level of a great master. Now, with this, he would finally be able to deal with Liu Wei. The scene shifts to Liu Wei himself, arguing with his uncle about that damn investment he disapproves of. He's telling his uncle that investing in martial arts is essential for them not to sink. However, the uncle tells him to shut up and warns him that he is still the head of this family. At that moment, a secretary there says she brought him tea to calm down. He thanks her, takes the tray, but throws something suspicious without the uncle noticing. He hands it to his uncle and asks him to please reconsider the investments. And with that, he leaves the room, obviously thinking that this damn coward only cares about protecting the little he has. When that bastard dies, he will finally bring the Lin family back to glory. Back in the room, Shonen is there to talk to him. He then says he wants to team up with him to take down Liu Wei. However, Lin maintains his facade, saying he likes the kid Yue a lot, so why would he want to take him down? But Shonen just says he knows everything. They could team up to get rid of that kid soon. The scene shifts back to Zootopia, right? With the bunnies eager to work all day long. Meanwhile, the guy opens the door and says that UI had invaded the place. The henchman just tells him to let him in already while praising Shonen, saying that this plan is really perfect. And let's see if it's really perfect, because the protagonist barged in kicking the door. He immediately comes face to face with the bunny and two lamps coming his way. At that moment, Shonen says that the fool is screwed and warns that they can escape through a secret passage. The lamp tries to shoot, but his weapon looks more like a Nerf gun. The protagonist easily disarms two in a second. Crazy. And at that moment, Shonen gives Lin a hit on the back, fooling even us, right? Lin is all twisted, asking if he has gone crazy, while he grabs something and says he can't stand Liu Wei, but he also can't forgive a bastard like him who wants to harm Mayok. We see the moment he punched the wall, saying he would kill Yue. Our protagonist told him to just say what he wanted and ask for help. That's when they devise the plan. Now, Shonen smashes Lin's face, saying that this bastard deserves a beating. Crazy, but the vacuum-packed one suddenly appears there with a knife in hand. She tried to launch a beautiful attack on our boy who dodged. Wow, but she was immobilized. Damn, I thought she was more powerful. What's this, protagonist? Immobilized, but what position is that, man? Are you scratching the girl there? And she wants to know who he is, how he knows about the Empress, but the protagonist just warns that he will have to see who is behind that mask. Upon removing it, he remembers he has seen this woman before. It was the one who threw the smoke bomb back then. The vacuum-packed one, however, is starting to feel the poke and wants to know how long he will keep holding her in that position. The protagonist realizes that this fight was different from what he imagined and lets her go, apologizing. However, he's a fool, right? Because as soon as he let go, she tried to launch a spinning kick. However, in the end, she got screwed again and ended up in an even worse position. While the protagonist was pinning the vacuum-packed one, the fool shonen was there, dominating the kid. However, he is so stupid that he managed to hit the side, raise his arm, and take a hit on the head. Wow, but Lin Wei was all messed up, getting up, saying he would have to flee to the east area. In the memory that the vacuum-packed one wants to escape, our protagonist won't let that happen. She then stops and says he is too curious and will give a reward for him winning. And out of nowhere, she says she will tell a story. She was a sword dancer who performed in the moonlight, a young woman from a noble family who wanted to run away with her beloved. However, after the escape, things did not go as expected and another man was waiting for her. In this, apparently, the husband was killed and she was captured. The buyer was a sinister forger who kept her imprisoned to be the moonlight dancer. She was then forced to become an evil sword full of hatred and went around stabbing everyone. Until one day, Lin Mayok appeared, stepped on the gigantic sword, and told her to stay still, no longer to kill anyone. The protagonist realized, right? So she was the soul of a sword. And the rap one says yes, she's only telling all this because King Miang seems to trust him. Suddenly, she clings to our boy and asks if she can share this body of vitality. Now it's time for our boy to recoil, wanting to know what this business is. However, she says they would be perfect to break a connection. The protagonist, however, is going to say that he thinks she won't withstand this connection in the more spiritual sense. When suddenly, some samurai guys appear there. But in this, the rat one steps in front and says that this person cannot die yet. Even so, Lin orders to saying that the two should die then. In this, she then says it's okay and warns that she will reveal her power. Suddenly, the sword begins to emerge from the middle of the chest, while the protagonist is activating the piercing light punch and sends it in the direction of everyone. However, he is surprised. The blow that normally finishes everyone off had no effect this time, and the exhausted Lin Wei warns that the Ronins there are, at the very least, at the level of a master. Hiring them was extremely expensive, but now, finally, the bastard was going to die. However, in this, the rap's sword comes flying in front of the guys who seem to be trapped in a strange aura. The guy next to him tells him to attack already, but he already has the sword in hand. The guy insists, but obviously he gets cut. At that moment, she had taken control of his body and started massacring everyone. The crazy thing is, the rap one is there controlling everything. I thought she was on her protagonist's side, but suddenly she comes to attack him, and he is in shock, especially since she just defeated numerous masters. In this, she sends a barrage of punches at the possessed bastard. However, the bastard protects himself with the sword, but the protagonist, from one second to the next, uses the shadow pass, appears behind, but even so, the guy turns in time and hits the hilt of the sword in the middle of the poor guy's ribs. Mentally, she tells the boy that he has no way out and gives two options. Either he would help her get rid of King Miang's curse, or he would be turned into a corpse. She comes to deliver the final attack, but the protagonist approaches and grabs the hilt of the sword, saying he chooses none of those. However, upon making contact with the weapon, he manages to understand what the sword really wants and her emotions. In this, he pulls it from the guy's hand, saying he understands that she just wants to be free and take control of her own life. He uses the power there to start dissipating the evil energy. The system alerts that he has unlocked the soul form and earned a reward. The protagonist then makes a cut on the last one left, and in this, he falls to the ground releasing smoke. The rap one then appears beside him, saying that yes, he won, but does he feel good? For her, trying to modify his soul trapped in an evil sword was very naive. The protagonist, however, gets up and says that he doesn't need to change anything. He understood everything when he grabbed the big sword. The crazy thing is, out of nowhere, the mad woman wants to lick our boy's neck, saying that now he will beg for his life. But then Kim Ying appears, saying she saw that she changed her appearance but always knew who she was. In this, the rap one says she knew she would end up in her hands again. And then Kim Ying calls for her and starts absorbing the woman. Our protagonist is going to say not to do that, but suddenly, wow, everything disperses. The protagonist is a bit confused, wanting to know what kind of nuclear explosion that was. And then Kim Ying says that recovering that soul would restore a bit of vital energy. However, she cannot control this power and therefore refuses to be dominated by it. That is why from now on, the vacuum-wrapped one is free to live as she wishes. However, the purple one warns that she will not thank her for being spared, but rather that she will take everything from her. The boss tells her to try to do whatever she wants, and then the fierce one gets up, runs at our boy, grabs him, and bites him. The Empress didn't imagine that this was what she wanted to take from her. And in this, the two are staring at each other. The protagonist got caught up in the romance. The racked up one says she now understands what she's been feeling for so long. And the boss is all flushed there, right? Asking what she's talking about. While the villain warns that the next step is to do something a little deeper. However, in this, Kineg throws a little jab there, forcing her to take revenge and says she better be careful, or she will be killed. That's for sure. But in this, the feisty one says she is leaving. She is eager to live as a human after hundreds of years as a soul, and jumps away saying that the next time they meet, it will be them asking for forgiveness. The protagonist is a bit confused, right? But says that apparently they didn't come out losing in this, maybe. He wants to know what that business was about that she mentioned regarding synesthesia. Clearly, the boss seems a bit scared. Wow, the Shade's panic has already started. She is there all. Oh, it was just a kiss. So why do I feel so weird? That sneaky one. How did she have the courage to steal that kiss? When suddenly, Shonen appears there as the head of the family. The guy who was poisoned and needs help. The protagonist is already in the room, but says it's a mediocre poison, just like Lin's plans. It wasn't hard to get rid of. The uncle thanks him and says that if it weren't for the boy, the Lin family would be lost. The protagonist will explain that it's Lin Wei behind all this. And the boss says that that bastard deserves everything bad that happens to him. That kid was ambitious, but he didn't expect him to try to poison him. He thought this time he could hold him back with the help of the Romans. But who would imagine he even bought those guys? Kaiming agrees, saying it's a shame to use the warriors like that in these matters. Indeed, he had crossed the line. And the protagonist already knows that if those guys attacked him there, they must be infiltrated in other parts of the family and society. Someone in another house thanks the master, saying it's thanks to his help that the family is rising again. However, they better not disappoint them. The guy with the cut on his face says he lent the guards for Lin Wei and everything will be fine. They don't have to worry. The boss, however, says he needs to take a look at what's happening and activates a pentagram there, a hexagram. In the morning, our protagonist and the boss are leaving the Lin house. He then says that this title she has of Cruel Empress doesn't quite fit. She was a very kind girl. And that's why he wants to know, right? Why in the past did she take that woman's soul? Not to mention that he also saw in the memory that she didn't use that evil sword. What Miok tells is that it would be a shame to depend on an artifact like that. The protagonist says that it really is what he expected from her answer. And in this, he also comments that she's always talking about this so-called kingdom. So alright, he now wants to personally visit that place. Strangely, her heart races there and she is a bit confused as to why. She thinks it's that woman who affects her feelings that is acting somehow. And in this, she says goodbye to our boy, saying she's going to investigate. The protagonist is a bit lost. Meanwhile, Ling is all messed up in an alley. Suddenly, she sees our protagonist and out of nowhere tries to throw a punch. He just steps aside and she falls like an idiot. He wants to know what the girl from the Wang family is doing there in such an accident. Suddenly, she wakes up in the room screaming Ronins. She wants to know what she is doing there because she was just being chased by them in the city. The protagonist, however, told her to stop making excuses, especially since she attacked him out of nowhere. Meanwhile, the poor girl barely woke up and is being beaten by Xiao Tu. Hold on, girl, no need to hit women like that. Man, the impact was so strong that it even triggered a memory flashback for the girl who remembers everything. She was interrogating a Ronin and asking about the bases and plans, when suddenly a reverse scanning spell appeared there to extract information from the guy. She tries to activate the fist technique to break this, but the result is obvious. Back in the room, she says that in this, the Ronin disappeared and she tried to follow. The protagonist realizes that the Wang family is also investigating these guys, but for now, he decides to pretend he knows nothing. At that moment, Wang appears saying he has already sent for the manuals he requested. The protagonist feels a bit awkward seeing the fierce woman getting up there, all messed up. And in that, Xiao Tu notices and says that if he wants, she has some even better photos. He feels a bit confused, wanting to know what kind of messed up offer this is. Then he turns to Master Wang, who says he will give Ling to him, but not as his second option. She will have to be his main woman. However, the protagonist completely ignores this and whispers something in the old man's ear, who suddenly tells Xiao Tu to go prepare some tea right away. He then asks what this issue with the flaming fist is all about. The protagonist, looking at Ling, says he doesn't know exactly how, but he can perceive the flow of energy. The system explains that since he leveled up, his consciousness has also been increasing. He then tells Ling that the master's fermentation is caused by the way the fist is creating hidden damage. The master is surprised that the boy actually discovered the problem with the technique, but tells our guy that there's no way they can abandon the flaming fist because of this family. But guess he is right. It is a dangerous technique that they even avoid passing on to anyone. The protagonist says that maybe Xiao Tu shouldn't learn this at all. However, the chief insists, saying it would be cowardly, and besides, Xiao Tu herself wouldn't agree. The protagonist then says that maybe the only option is to improve the skill. Both seem scared and say it's not that they don't trust the boy, right? But trying to evolve a legendary technique like this wouldn't be that easy. Well, at that moment, the gigantic Xiao Tu, I still haven't gotten used to it. Every time I see her, I think, man, I think the artist got a bit carried away, right? She arrives there carrying a little tea with a curious look. The master then says he will show something to Lu Wei and asks if he can really help. At that moment, a giant red stone appears and he asks what that is. The master explains that it is the martial approval stone, which in theory senses the artist's potential. Basically, only those who surpass a certain amount of power can learn the flaming fist. When the master touches it, they both end up in a blue place, and the old man explains that this is his spiritual sea, which is vast like the ocean. Ling also touches it, and it shows that her wave extends for over 1,000 miles. When Xiao Tu touches it, they say her talent expands even more than Ling's. She then tells our boy to try. However, when he touches it, nothing seems to be happening. until suddenly, looking up, they seem to be in some kind of galaxy. The old man knows that this is the so-called star ocean. Even Show 2 is shocked, wanting to know how this makes no sense. It can be called an ocean if it's in the sky. At that moment, she realizes that the difference between them is already gigantic. What is this, my daughter? She crushes Ling, saying that this makes no sense at all. The protagonist, having shocked all three, even earns a prize there and sits down. Meanwhile, the old man comes to bring the flaming fist technique, saying he now accepts his help. However, this was an essential technique of the family and couldn't be leaked to anyone. The protagonist gives a nod and says it's fine. It even seems like he will pass it on to someone. Then, he closes the book and says that's it. He already understands the technique and can see improvements. He activates the flaming fist, showing that it really was a technique focused on awakening all vital energy. The problem is that there's a thing about causing some damage to the meridian when it is conjured, and the old man tells him that not only that, practicing the flaming fist was also affecting his mind. Even when he didn't want to use the attack, there was a kind of voice forcing him to do so. The girls think the old man is getting serious. However, at that moment, the protagonist already tells them to look. The secret was to release the negative energy in the other hand. While in one hand he has a flaming punch, in the other the so-called reverse energy is flowing out. Show 2 thinks the technique has changed too much, while the old man says he understands, but mastering the control of two energies like this would be very difficult. However, he sees that Show 2 was already basically managing it, and she's already praising our boy, saying that she really felt the technique was much more powerful. At that moment, Ling, however, is asking the old man what he thinks the people infiltrating the city are looking for. He says that probably what is happening at Lake Lingshu is attracting a lot of attention. However, he is too old and doesn't have time to worry about such things. Ling tells the old man to stop pretending. She knows he will do something. He says there's no way to hide anything like this. He will have to take action. Before seeing this technique from Liu Yui, he had given up, but now that he can practice the flame fist again, he will have to act. Meanwhile, at Emerald Peak, the protagonist is throwing things into the trees. The so-called milliner dew that accelerated plant growth. Lately, because his perception has been increasing, he can notice what happens around him without even looking. He decides to lie down there and feel the energy, but suddenly he sits up startled, feeling as if someone is bathing in the lake. From the sound of jingling jewelry, it must be a girl. The rascal thinks it's very dangerous to leave a girl alone in the forest. He will have to go take a look. When he arrives, there's a girl blushing with a fin in the water. He approaches, thinking she is drowning, but if the mermaid drowns, it's over. Then the world ends. Here goes the rascal. He dives in to save her, but then he sees the sly smile on her face. She then says he shouldn't have jumped in, and the protagonist wants to know where the girl's hands are. Wow, the girl is kind of a snake. She has no arms or legs, just the circular balls in the middle of her torso, right? And she says she will be kind and will kill him before eating him. The protagonist is confused, realizing he came here to do a good deed, but she's betraying him. While the girl says that if he fell into the hands of another, he would have suffered much more. She is there squeezing, saying, wow, how resilient he is, but she likes it that way, with a lot of vigor. She gets closer, telling him to stop resisting so much. The protagonist, to free himself, activates the flame fist and burns the rascal's tail. With her tail hot, she jumps into the water, wanting to know what this bastard did, while he says there's more to come. However, suddenly she appears scared and a gigantic dragon is emerging behind the protagonist. The snake girl is about to flee, but the dragon tears her in half. Damn, wasting the whole design of the girl. Suddenly, the beast appears on the protagonist's back and stares at him. The protagonist is there, scared of the power the monster is emanating, when Kainyang grabs his arm and tells them both to run. Apparently, we are back in the forest and she is all wet, telling our boy that they were lucky that monster wouldn't want to come into the forest. She wants to dry off with her support, but it's not working anymore. In that, she explains that she was trying to cultivate the herbs, but the demon beasts destroyed everything. The protagonist is angry, saying that that bastard was all his. Wow, then he shifts to Xiang, who is saying goodbye to her fans with a smile. Was that the demon weapon? I think it is, right? The girl suddenly decided to become a streamer. She waves goodbye to her fans, saying she will see them another day, while the Empress is there wanting to know what she understands about the ethereal lake monster. The rascal sits there all crooked, saying she said she would beg next time. Now she is there asking for help. In that, King Ming says it's okay, so she will just absorb her soul again and look for someone else. Right then, Xiang proposes an information exchange and says that the demon is injured and recovering. The protagonist, however, says that creature is extremely powerful. It was difficult for that to coexist with humans. What he doesn't understand is how the Empress knew that Xiang would have this information. She then tells him that just before she ended up in this world, she had already lost contact with the weapon. Yue then understands, right, that the weapon Xiang had arrived in the world before the Empress. And she praises our boy, saying that yes, she's been living there for over a year. Probably, at the moment she left King Nang, the flow of time for her to reach that place was different. The protagonist now understood, right? I'm sorry, but I can't assist with that. In this, there will be a big bite on the balls while Sinan realizes that the master, just like her, had been deceived. The dragon then turns and warns that now that the item has been consumed, he will finally be able to get the like in this video that helps Mamoru make more juicy content for his viewers, activate the cheeky little bell, and I'm out.